Restream, streaming to the Snake 10 Mile Trail 10 Mile Facebook group. And I have Eric Vieira here with me. So, Eric, welcome. I apologize for all of the things that didn't go right. Facebook. I, it's been a while since I used Facebook directly, and the disadvantage with this format is that I don't have any way to monitor comments, the live comments, and so people can see us, but they can't reply. So uh, now they can chat among themselves. So if anybody's watching this live, they can the comments will show up to everybody else, but they will not show up to me, unfortunately. So
Okay.
so anyway, well, thank you again for making time to do this, Eric. I have seen your posts, several of your posts on Facebook in the various groups on the Trailhawks, and you have kind of been named as the the snake expert for the Lawrence Trailhawks. So, wanted to find out you're also have done a trail runner as well. So, I wanted to talk to you about a little bit about trail running before we get into snakes. So, how was it? Did you get started running trails?
Basically started, well, I've always ran, basically been active, soccer or the military for fitness. And of course, the love of the outdoors and hiking. So naturally, just to combine the two, learned that trail running was a thing. And I started actually running races, and I think it was around 2008.
Okay.
And the first trail race I did might have been couple of years later, and it was the Intro to Summer Trail Run, the 2.8 mile that the Trail Nerds put on.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hooked since then. So
yeah, so you ran it. Was it Wyandotte Lake? Was that they
correct.
still
Correct.
do that? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So what was your progression after that? Did you go out and do ultra marathon, or were you set your goal on an ultra marathon? Or?
Yeah, I've ran multiple 50Ks. The last one I did, or the most notable one I did, was Cactus to Cloud in New Mexico.
Okay.
Back in my hometown of Alamogordo, New Mexico.
Okay. Well, cool. Now, how did you've studied snakes? So tell me a little bit about how you got started with snakes and what's kind of your background in your study of relationship with snakes.
Basically, since I could crawl, I've been chasing snakes and lizards. So they've always fascinated me. Grew up all over the country, so military brat, moved around a lot, so got to experience a lot of different reptiles and have fun catching various types, mostly in the U.S. Then went to college for wildlife ecology and conservation.
Okay.
After that, I started working with reptiles in zoos.
Okay.
Did that for quite a few years and ended up at the West Palm Beach Zoo as the supervisor of reptiles. And did that for a while and then realized, student loans actually did need to get paid back. The zoo field, although it's fun, it doesn't pay well. So I think it was about $12 an hour before taxes in South Florida.
Oh, wow.
So then I took a job working as an ecologist here in Kansas City.
Okay. So what does an ecologist? What does that entail? I mean, it seems. I mean, I kind of know what ecology is. I mean, we started, but kind of how does that differ from what you were doing before?
I basically now I do a lot of like wetland permitting. Go out looking for wetlands or threatened and endangered species surveys.
Okay.
Do environmental permitting for construction projects.
Okay. Yeah, I know my neighbor, I think, had to hire somebody because he had it was a tax thing for his land, and wasn't able to develop it because of it was habitat for a particular snake. So yeah, so you'd be the kind of person that he would call to do a survey, probably.
Correct. I could do the habitat assessment and then see if there's the species is there, or those type of things. If they are, then I can communicate with the agencies and get it worked out so the work could be done, but everything gets mitigated.
Okay, right, yeah.
That's the ultimate goal.
Right, because he said that it was the habitat was the habitat was ideal, and so he had to he said he could mitigate by actually setting aside other habitat, but yeah, then he said he found one of the species that it was several years later that so they were actually in the habitat. So
Yeah.
yeah. So, but you still have an interest in snakes. I know that you've got a lot of. So I grew up scared to death of snakes. I mean, terrified, and kind of the opposite of what you were. I just I would not walk through tall grass. I mean, wouldn't go, and there were the places I wouldn't go just because I was afraid of snakes. So, what for people who may be like I used to, and I'm not that way anymore, but maybe like I used to be, what is some things that could help alleviate some of those worries about people who are so terrified about encountering snakes out in the wild?
Well, it sounds a little bit cliche, but it's true. Snakes are more afraid of us than we are of them.
Hmm.
We're the larger animal. They're gonna feel our vibrations as we're walking or running, as long as they can sense the vibrations through the jawbones, and they will slither off, try to avoid as much as possible. Um, so a lot of times you won't see them because they'll already have moved off the trail or moved out of your way.
Hmm.
If you're really worried about it, you can grab a branch and just move it in front of you through the tall grasses, and then that if there's a snake there, say like a rattlesnake, well, it'll alert you well
Hmm.
before you get to it. So you'll
Yeah.
but just keep your eyes and ears open.
Yeah, and most of the snakes, that I've seen along the trail, they're headed out. If I even walk up to them, they'd really try to get off the trail. But but I imagined that I've probably passed some of them that they just kind of laid there and beside the trail as I went by and didn't move.
Oh, it's fair to say you have passed far more snakes than you've seen.
Yeah.
You've probably passed a snake every time you've been out there.
Hmm. Yeah, it was. There was one time that I remember I stopped for a drink, and it was a green. It was very very fast snake, not poisonous, and I s- it was near me, and I guess it was afraid that I saw it or something because it took off, and it was just a few feet from me, probably 3 feet, and it just decided maybe maybe I was not I wasn't moving moving out of the way fast enough, so it took off. So.
Yep,
Uh,
if given the opportunity, they will flee rather than stand their ground.
yeah. So I was thinking about that. One of the main snakes that I've encountered on trails that's poisonous. I mean, I've encountered a lot of black snakes, and a lot of non-poisonous species as well. But occasionally I run into a copperhead, and that seems to be a common snake. And the they a couple of them have moved away, but a few of them have just kind of didn't seem to be in any hurry to get off the trail as I came up. Is that something that's kind of characteristic of their species, or what? Why did?
In a sense, copperheads kind of rely on their coloration as camouflage. So if they think they are blended in, they're not going to move
Okay.
because they're not going to want to give themselves away.
Hmm.
So if as long as they think they're still hidden, they're likely to stay put.
Okay. Okay. So, what are the things that people who hear this may not? I part of my getting over the fear was being able to identify snakes, and so I don't know that all the species, but I've kind of learned what the poisonous ones look like, and so that I can avoid them as much as possible. So, what are some of the things that people could do to kind of identify, whether a snake's poisonous or not? I mean,
The
is there?
the best thing to do, say particularly in this area, in the Kansas City area, and these trails, is basically just learn what the copperhead and the timber rattlesnake, the two main venomous species that we have here, learn how to identify those. If all you know how to identify is the venomous ones, then that'll keep you far safer than just guessing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You will hear various different methods, such as, if it has an elliptical pupil or if it has a triangular shaped head.
Mm-hmm.
Those things are all well and good, but I don't like to actually tell people to go by that because they can be confused. For instance, you'll have rat snakes, king snakes, garter snakes, water snakes, when they get threatened, they'll flatten their head out and it'll give it a triangular shape.
Okay.
So it'll look like it's big, bad, and venomous because it's a triangle shaped head, and people will kill them just because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I just say basically here, if it has a rattle, it's venomous.
Mm-hmm.
Only rattlesnakes will have the rattles. That's if you see the rattle, because you'll have snakes like rat snakes, king snakes, that will actually shake their tail in the weeds, and it'll sound very similar, especially if it's dried grasses.
Yeah, I've heard that they're trying to mimic a rattlesnake to sound more dangerous.
Basically, just to warn you, let them know that they're agitated and that they're there. But yeah, it's a kind of a sense of mimicry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, once you hear the actual sound of a rattlesnake, you'll know it's quite a bit different. But if you first hear it, it's going to give you a little bit of a start.
Mm-hmm.
It'll startle you a little bit.
Yeah.
And copperheads are fairly easy to identify based on their coloration and their general pattern. If you're looking at copperheads from the side, they'll have like brown blotches that look like Hershey Kisses.
Okay.
Hershey Kiss marks. And if you're looking at them from above, instead of Hershey Kisses, it'll look like hourglasses.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll be the light brown or coppery colored.
Coppery color, yeah.
Very beautiful snakes, especially the ones we have around Clinton Lake.
Yeah. Their colorations are really nice, and they're. I've seen several. I've seen a couple at Clinton. I've seen a couple at Wyandotte, and so if there's not a way to move around them, I mean, that's the typical. I think the advice is to, if they're on the trail, or if you encounter one, you try to move around it as much as possible. But if that's not possible, what would you advise people to do?
I personally would advise, I'd say, if you don't have experience working with the venomous species, shooing them off the trail, leave them be and let them go on their own. If you have a water bottle, you can sometimes spray the water bottle, get it close to them, and that can get them to move. Just make sure when you do stuff like that, you're back further than at least a body length away.
Okay.
Because you want to make sure you give yourself enough room to back up if you're going to do something that if what you're trying to do actually agitates the snake and the snake becomes defensive, you want to make sure you have room to stay clear.
Yeah. There's one I encountered that it was just laying across the trail and didn't seem to. And as I kind of stomped on the ground, and the vibration didn't seem to affect it at all. And it was, I knew that if whichever way that I couldn't go, I could go around back behind it, but I thought, well, if it turned around, it still could, it would be close enough. So I took a stick and just very gently kind of pushed its tail. And it brought its tail, it felt the stick and kind of curled made his tail squiggle up. And then I just kind of pushed it a little bit more gently, and then it took off. I felt like I did it without agitating it. It was,
as long as you do that gently and you have a stick that makes that allows you to be out of reach, so
Yeah.
further back than the body length of the snake.
Yeah.
Then that's a good way of doing it, but you got to be gentle when you do that, because if you go in quick and forcibly poke the snake with the stick, then it's going to get defensive.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was my goal, was to not get it too riled up, to just, I just wanted it to move. And so, so yeah. And I was make sure it was far enough away from it. But so, you've talked a little bit in the past about what happens if you would happen to surprise a snake and they would bite you. What are kind of some of the things that you, like, I remember I grew up, they said, cut an X in the fangs and suck the venom out. And well, in fact, I had a snake bite kit I bought. It was like, had suction, razor blade and suction, and
They're useless.
yeah.
Do not waste your money on them.
So what do you do if that happens?
Well, first and foremost, call 911. You want to alert the emergency services as quickly as you can. So if you know you're bitten and it was a venomous snake, back up, clear away from the snake. Don't try to catch it. You do not need to bring the snake into the emergency room. They don't need to identify the snake to be able to treat you. In this area, all the snakes are going to use the same antivenom.
Okay.
So just get clear and call 911, or have somebody else, if you're with somebody, have them call 911. And while that's going on, you remove, if you're bitten on the leg, say you got compression sleeves on, calf sleeves, take them off. Remove the tight clothing, tight jewelry, watches. If you're bitten on the hand, remove the watch, any rings, because it's going to swell up. And you do not want anything that's going to constrict the area.
Mm-hmm.
Be calm as you can. If you're close to the trailhead, you can go back out to slowly walk back out to your car. For the most part, unless you have an anaphylactic shock, an allergic reaction to the venom, it's life-threatening, but it's not going to kill you immediately. So it's not one of those, oh, you're bit, you're dead.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have time to get help. So no tourniquets, no ice, no cutting. All that can cause more harm than good. You may think a tourniquet is going to slow the venom, but what it's going to do is the venom of the snakes we have here actually destroys tissue. So if you tie the tourniquet around the limb, all that venom is concentrating in that limb, destroying the tissue.
Okay.
So the general guidance is to keep the affected limb, the bitten limb, elevated above heart level, so that it's able to drain and it actually helps ease the pain as well.
Okay. That would be hard with the leg, if you got bit on the leg.
Yep, but that's where you call 911 first, clear out. If you can get to a good spot, then you can lay down and elevate the leg until help arrives.
Okay.
So you don't want to drive yourself to the hospital, though.
Okay. That's probably not.
I mean, people do it. It can be done, but I'd advise against it, because you never know how you're going to react to the venom.
Mm-hmm.
You could crash on the way there and hurt somebody else and yourself even worse than just the bite itself.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of, I'm thinking about people who may be by themselves and quite some distance from help. What kind of, I know you can't, everybody would be different, but how quickly do you have to get? I mean, when does it become life-threatening, I guess is.
Well, as you alluded to, that's different for everybody. So it's hard to say, but we're generally speaking hours instead of minutes.
Okay. Okay.
especially with the snakes we have here. Especially with a copperhead, you got ample time with a copperhead. Now, if you were bitten by a large timber rattlesnake, that's going to be different because they have a lot more venom and more potent venom than the copperhead.
Okay. So rattlesnake venomins in general, I mean, other species as well, more potent.
Yes, yes. For the most part, most of the rattlesnakes are going to be more potent than a copperhead.
Okay.
Copperheads, you'll hear reports. I don't advise it, but you'll hear reports of people getting bitten and not getting treated and being fine. The problem with that is it's a tissue destroying venom. So although you can live without the antivenom, it's best to get it. The
Okay.
only true way to cure it is with antivenom.
Okay. So the antivenom, does that help preserve the tissue? I guess what kind of tissue damage is?
It helps break down the venom proteins, and then it doesn't reverse damage.
Okay.
So you'll which is why there are times when you get bitten and the damage can be so extensive that they'll have to amputate the limb, just because of the way the necrosis, tissue damage.
Okay.
But for the most part, but you just get treated as soon as you can, because as they say in the venom world, time is tissue.
Okay.
So,
well, that is good to know. And so, what are some of the things people can do to avoid getting bitten? What are the things that, I mean, precautions the trail runners should take? Anything that have along with them, or best practices?
Nothing you can really have along with you that to prevent being bitten, especially if you're out running. If you're not going to be wearing snake chaps or anything like that, protective gear. So the best thing you can do is just be alert and be aware of your surroundings. Instead of jumping over logs, jump on and then over, so you don't accidentally jump and step right next to a snake. It gives you a little bit of a time to see what's on the opposite side of the rock or the log, especially the larger downed logs or larger boulders. You want to be able to see what's on the other side. That way you don't startle or jump and land on a copperhead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's some people that I run with that they have actually had to jump over copperhead because they've gotten,
Yep.
They weren't paying, I guess not paying attention, but
so no, it happens. I've had to jump over a copperhead before. Don't recommend it, but I mean, most of the time you can jump over them and they're not gonna strike at you. It was in the middle of a trail marathon where I had to jump over one, so I jumped over it, grabbed a stick, moved it off the trail so others could pass.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recommend that either unless you know what you're doing. But
right. Yeah. Well, last year I was with Gary Henry and we were taking flags up, and we were actually sweeping the course and removing the flags and all the directional signs. And it was early in the morning, and I looked down and there was something moving between his legs, and I said, "Gary, there's a copperhead that's right between your leg." He had actually stepped over it, and it was working on beating a retreat. So that was good. But yeah, they're not as aggressive as what people.
Yeah, in those instances, stand still. Just stand completely still. The snake will go on its own. It'll continue slithering. You won't have to worry about it. If you are worried, you can always, and you have, somebody else around, they can move so the snake can look at that movement, and then you can slowly back up Just make sure you're slow and steady when you move backwards from the snake, and don't make any quick movements. Quick movements can startle them and entice a strike.
Okay. So, and from what I remember, snakes' eyesight is not necessarily their primary way of detecting what's around them. I mean, for as far as warm-blooded creatures, is that true?
They can see you, but the venomous snakes here what we have are called pit vipers. They're in the family of snakes called pit vipers, and they have heat sensing pits, and they'll actually sense through the heat that there's some warm blooded animal there.
Okay.
So they'll be able to detect very minute changes in temperature with their heat sensing pits, and then of course the tongue and the Jacobson's organ. The tongue will be able to, they'll flick that out and taste the air, smell the air with the tongue, and let them know what's around them.
Okay. So and I've heard that. So, that's common with almost every snake, isn't it? They flick the tongue out as to
Yes,
kind of sense their surroundings.
correct.
So how detailed can they get with that? Is there any studies done, and what they how do they relate to their world as far as sensing what's around them?
What do you mean by how deep?
Well, I mean, we have a sense of smell. I mean, so we can smell chocolate chip cookies baking and bread baking. We can discern the difference. Do snakes have the same kind of thing when they taste the air?
Yes, their tongue is actually forked, and that actually helps them when searching prey, because the forked tongue will each branch of the fork will pick up scent molecules, and when the tongue goes back into the Jacobson's organ, they'll be able to tell which direction has more or less, and be able to follow the trail that way.
Okay, interesting. So the same way we have depth of field with the two eyes, their forked tongue works similar.
Yeah, yeah.
Huh. That's fascinating. Yeah, I read a little bit about snakes, and knew that they use their tongue for sensing, but I wasn't sure kind of how it worked and what they're able to do with it. And
And one way you can sort of tell whether or not a snake is agitated. Say you come across a rattlesnake or a copperhead, you're running along, and then it rears back, coils up. You can watch the movement of the tongue. If the tongue flick is out there and it's an extended, long, slow tongue flick, then they're just checking their environment, just checking what's out there. If it's quick movements, then they're getting agitated.
Okay, well that's a good thing to know because
So a lot of times you'll see pictures with rattlesnakes where the tongue is flicked out and curled back over the top of their head.
oh, huh.
That's them just sensing their environment.
Hmm. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, and so one of the things that I wanted to ask, kind of on a personal level, occasionally we go down to Texas. I know the diamondback rattlesnakes are different than the timber rattlesnakes.
Correct.
So and I mean that's kind of what you grew up with. You in the desert, isn't
Yep.
that's the species that's there? So are they more or less? I mean, is there any difference in temperament? I heard certain species have different levels of aggression. Well, for example, most of the time, bull snakes have they always tend to be agitated if they're around humans. Very
I like to view it as different levels of defensive behavior instead of aggression.
okay.
The snakes aren't truly aggressive. They're not saying a snake is aggressive. It tends to bring to mind that they're going to chase you. They're going to go out of their way to attack you.
Yes. Well, I apologize. My
And snakes won't do that. But yes, Western diamondback rattlesnakes are more defensive than the timber rattlesnakes we have here. They're quicker to turn on the defense. Whereas timber rattlesnakes, a lot of times, sometimes they won't even rattle when you approach them, or they'll slither off without rattling. Western diamondbacks, it doesn't take much to get them to rattle and get them to coil up in a defensive posture.
Okay.
So they're definitely the more dangerous of the two snakes.
Yeah. I've only encountered timber rattlesnakes, I think, once, maybe twice, and both times in fact, one was in the middle of the road, and it like flattened his body, like it was trying to like blend in to its surroundings. Was kind of the it didn't rattle at all. I mean, just
Yep.
I walked up to it and it was laying in the road, and it kind of flattened out like, oh, I won't be seen.
Yep.
And,
yeah, they like to go unseen as much as possible, because if you don't see them, or they think you don't see them, then they got nothing to worry about in their minds.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, and you said, I appreciate you're going to be with us at the snake race this year, and we're going to have a photo contest. So, what are some of the species that we have that people might encounter out there, besides the the copperheads, and I know there's a lot of other non-venomous species. What are the common ones that are out there?
Common ones that I see a lot of people that I will commonly get pictures sent to me. What's this? You'll get decay snake, the decay's brown snake. It's just a small, harmless species, but really cool looking. But they all flatten themselves out and get a good flattened triangular shaped head when they get into their defensive posture. They're 12 to 14 inches long. They're small snakes. Black rat snakes, or well, the western rat snakes as they're called, they're real common.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you'll see the yellow-bellied racers. They're around the area. Garter snakes. Let's see, what else have I seen pictures of? Great Plains, not Great Plains, prairie king snakes I've seen. They're around. And they're probably the most common that you'll see, and ringneck snakes.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably the most common that you'll encounter on the trails. I have seen people take pictures of like the rough green snake, but I actually haven't seen one on the trails around. So they're not common to see, but they're out there. And of course, water snakes, depending on where you're at. The northern water snake is a real common species around.
Yeah. So, and most people see a snake in the water and they think it's a water moccasin.
Correct. And in this area, we have no water moccasins. There's been no documented reports of water moccasins up around the Kansas City area or north of the Missouri River. Basically, think of water moccasins as far as in Missouri goes, mostly down by the boot heel of Missouri, the southeast corner of the state, the Ozarks area.
Yeah, and I think there was a documented case. I mean, for years I heard no water moccasins ever found in Kansas, but I think since then, I mean, that's been a long time ago. Since then, I think the very far southeast Kansas has found one or two reports, but
it could be, yep.
But
one thing you got to think of is, with all the floods and everything that's happened, that can help expand the snake's range.
Oh, really? Huh.
Because the flood waters can push the snakes further than they normally would.
Okay.
Now that's not going to say you're going to have an established population. They're going to be able to breed, nothing like that. But you may encounter a lone species. So there's always a chance of a water moccasin being about, but there haven't been any documented reports.
Yeah.
So chances are very slim. Never zero.
Yeah.
Just because they're not too far away, and floodwaters can carry them. So there's always that chance that something that has hitched a ride on the floodwaters, or somebody's even caught and released. Who knows what happens, but there's always a chance. Never zero, but very, very slim. Chances are, if you see a snake in the water, it's a water snake.
Mm-hmm. And other snakes can swim as well, right?
All snakes can swim.
All
Yep.
snakes can swim. Yeah. So what you said, you mentioned the racer, and I've seen snakes move very quickly. Is it, what is it that classifies a racer as a snake as a racer?
That's it's a species of snake. So basically, racers are long, thin snakes, but they got fairly large, round eyes. They're very diurnal and active hunting snakes. Very, very fast. A lot of times, you'll see pictures of racers. They'll have their head up off the ground, looking, just scanning around. They're very visual hunters.
Huh.
And they're, for the most part, the ones we have around here tend to be more on the gray side with like a yellowish belly for the yellow-bellied racer.
Okay. Are there green ones as well?
No, those a lot of times those would be like the smooth or rough green snake.
Okay. Yeah, because the one that took off when I was standing next to it was green, which I don't see green. I think that's probably the first one I've seen out in the wild.
Probably 2.5, maybe 3 feet long.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would have been either a rough or a smooth green snake.
Yeah, but it took off very fast, and so I was faster than most snakes that I've seen. Most snakes have they slither, but they're not. This guy was really moving.
Yeah.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today. I appreciate that. And you're going to be at the snake. So if people have questions about snakes, can they come and talk to you at the race?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I'll be there. If anybody sees a snake on, a copperhead or a rattlesnake on the course, if it's reported, I can go out and catch it and bring it back and show people how to move around and what to do if you encounter one with an actual snake there. So
yeah. Well, that's cool. Well, with that, hopefully we will be able to do that. So,
but yeah, if any questions, I'm always open for questions. So feel free to ask or leave questions in the comment on the thread back in the snake group. The 10 miler race page.
So since we weren't able to take questions live, we can follow up if somebody sees this and has questions. So.
Correct. Yep. And I'll happily answer them, reply to them on the post. I did see somebody mentioned, because I left a couple of questions, like trying to get questions ahead of time on what to answer. And I did see somebody say, what's your favorite kind? And well, my favorite kind of snake is actually whichever snake is in front of me at the start. But around here, it would be the timber rattlesnake is probably my favorite snake.
Yeah. And
in the Kansas City area.
And those are ones I know that they're around, but those are ones I don't see. I mean,
yeah, exactly. You won't see them that often, and that's one of the reasons why they're one of my favorite snakes. Is they're one I love rattlesnakes, the buzztails as they're called.
Mm-hmm.
They're cool little snakes, cool snakes. Bad reputation as all snakes have. Not deserved. They'd rather leave people alone and go about their day. So I guess if anything, to take away from all of this, just one, snakes are more afraid of you than you are of them. 2, if you leave them alone, they'll leave you alone. 3, if you harass the snake and try to hurt it, the snake's going to defend itself, and that's when bites happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's a good way to summarize what we've done. So, well, thank you again, Eric. I'm going to end the stream, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the race in July.
I'll be there.